And so we saw it as something that was significant on Ethereum, and there was no reason why it shouldn't be significant on Cosmos. What are the new advancements in the Cosmos SDK that have been shipped since then? And also, like, how could we use those to essentially build a super oracle that was extremely powerful and safe? Performance margins that no other oracle can come close to, right? You have millisecond fresh price updates. Hey, we want a new feed, and it's instantly added.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning back into the Bare Metal Podcast. I'm Ship the Code from RockoX Labs. Today here again with Maghnus Mareneck from Skip.money. Welcome, Magnus.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be back.
So I actually looked up one of the last time we recorded this was in December 22, one of the first episodes we've ever done. So thanks for hopping on that time. Appreciate it. There was a time of MEV. And we also had Megatecon around the same time. It always felt you guys had a sort of competition on who's going to build the best infrastructure. Of course, a lot of things have changed since then, and I guess this is a good point to you, to explain like what Skip is and how did you get to build it. Yeah,
sure. So, I mean, my background is in quantitative finance and computer science, engineering, essentially. I've known my co-founder Barry for like 10 years. We were always close friends. We met in college. And we got really excited about MEV, in 2021. It was a new topic back then. Flashbots was just really starting with their first versions of their software like MEVGeth and things like that. We saw big money there. On Ethereum, there was like $1 billion of estimated captured MEV. And so we saw it as something that was significant on Ethereum, and there was no reason why it shouldn't be significant on Cosmos. Right, it actually was extremely significant when Terra was around, and we joined the Cosmos ecosystem right as Terra collapsed, and we thought that it would come back. Right,
exciting times.
So very exciting times, and we built the first version of Megatech I think was right around the same time too, but we built one version of essentially a Tendermint client that allowed for top of block auctions. So essentially what that allowed for was traders to, submit bids along with bundles of transactions to capture MEV at the top of a block, back running. We didn't allow front running or sandwiching. That was our big thing because, we did believe that those things were harmful, and we still do. And that went really well. We got a ton of validators onboarded to starting to use it. Validators were making money. It was actually really generating income for them. That was a meaningful increase on their commission rewards. But yeah, essentially we eventually saw the forest for the trees, not just on Cosmos, but on Ethereum too. MEV is a very strong commoditizing force. So what that means is every actor along the supply chain, from the searcher to the auctioneer, even to the validator, becomes commoditized over time. And so when you're building a business there, especially one that you want to grow and, it's venture funded, and so you have a mandate to grow, it wasn't exciting for us, like on a 2
There's no clear path to find that growth.
That's right, yeah. And the separate thing, that was part of it, but honestly, the big thing that pushed us away from MEV was realizing that it wasn't going to be the thing that really moved our ecosystem forward. And we felt like we had the capability to do things that actually did move the ecosystem forward, and that there was so much low-hanging fruit around us that we were just ignoring because we were focused on MEV. And so we felt like we have to do something, right? It's kind of like our responsibility, given how much we know and, how excited we are about Cosmos and about the ecosystem to try to work to grow it in a more meaningful way. And so that's what really precipitated the transition, or I guess the pivot away from MEV and into building core infrastructure.
Super interesting. I guess it feels like a major pivot. Must have been pretty exciting in the company there for a while. Super interested in what you guys are building now. So how would you summarize what you guys are focusing on today, high level?
Yeah, so we're focused on two major things. I would say at a high level, where our beliefs are right now, and I think what we believe for a long time, is that sovereign blockchains are special. Right? They're special for a number of reasons, but they are especially infrastructurally special, right? In terms of how they're constructed. And most of that specialness is essentially the result of having your own validator set, you essentially have a set of 60 plus highly skilled infrastructure operators that can do things for your chain that roll-ups or folks with centralized sequencers or folks outside of their own app chain ecosystem can't do, right? And what we've realized is you can actually leverage that ability, you can leverage that strength to build some extremely powerful in-protocol applications. To the extent that you kind of don't need a lot of third parties that most crypto protocols need to partner with to get things done. So we're starting with oracles. Oracles are traditionally something that is a huge line item on a balance sheet, right? Something that folks pay a lot of money for because they need to pay both for the integration, but then they also need to pay for the constant updates. And then if they want to scale the number of currency pairs they get, right? If they want to expand to getting feeds for new assets, they usually have to pay an incremental additional cost, either in terms of gas or in terms of the native protocol chain's token, like Chainlink or Pyth, to get those fees. And so there's a much better way to do this. And we took some inspiration from Terra back in the day. They had probably one of the first in protocol oracles. But essentially what we've done is
those blocks with hundreds of TXs, which were committing the new prices for the price pairs.
That's right. But it wasn't secure is the problem. And so it wasn't actually a good model for like legitimate, well, Terra was legitimate in some way, but for folks like DYDX, that wasn't a very secure model because validators were very easily able to lie about the prices. And so we set about sort of like thinking about what are the new advancements in the Cosmos SDK that have been shipped since then? And also like how could we use those to essentially build a super oracle that was extremely powerful and safe. And so, the confluence or the combination of the idea of restaking or staking security from your native chain into the oracle operation and having a native oracle as a sidecar on each validator and vote extensions and APCI++ that are on the Cosmos SDK side, all of those together is what made Slinky happen. So it's a native restaked oracle, which means it uses the native security of a chain, which is slashable in the case of like oracle malfunction or oracle dishonesty. And then it also uses vote extensions to load in and aggregate oracle prices across the network securely. So yeah, that's sort of like what...
Restaking in the sense... Restaking, big word today, so let's just analyze it real quick.
Yeah.
So your code or Slinky makes the stake that the validator has, all of it, slashable using a new reason, which is your prices that you're reporting are out of whack with the distribution from the rest of the network. Is that sort of a fair summary?
Pretty much, yeah. So it's using the native stake exactly, all of it. Which means that the oracle operation has the same security properties as the native chain. It's using that as like it's using the oracle as a new slashable reason, and it could be for incorrect prices, but it could also be for like not posting prices at all, right? So it's like sort of like a lack of performance or like a non-participation, and also for like not updating how you report prices. So for example, if you're running a weird system to report your prices, like it can, that is detectable as well. So yeah, I mean, that's essentially what restaking is at the end of it, right? It's like taking stake, using it for different purpose, adding additional slashing conditions, and then usually it also means additional reward conditions, right? And so we can't, of course, be in charge of that reward, like the native protocols have to be on board with that, but we're already starting to see progress there. So for example, Neutron, who we're integrating with, will be allocating some of their budget that they were planning on giving to hub validators as in terms of additional incentive. They're planning on giving part of that to Slinky operators who are operating it correctly.
And so this is interesting. It's a Slinky operator. So you're building this in a pluggable fashion so that not all of the voting power on the network needs to be running Slinky oracles. Do I get that right?
So in the case of Slinky, because we wanted to have the same Byzantine properties as consensus itself, behind every update, you have to have at least 2/3 of the stake of the chain supporting that update. And then it's aggregated across those validators that participated. So if you have less than 2/3 of the validators by stake weight sort of like reporting a price and contributing to that price, then that price isn't uploaded at all. So you
Isn't
do
valid.
have to have a minimal, or you have to have like the consensus minimum in terms to actually like perform updates.
If not all of the validators are running Slinky, then you might be have more liveness problems than the underlying consensus, in the sense of you can't actually commit new prices.
Yes, and also they'd be slashed. Like the slashing modules essentially say if you don't run the price, I mean this is configurable on a per chain basis, but if you don't run the prices oracle, then you'll slowly get slashed over time.
Right. Makes sense. So that's thinking. One thing that you said at the beginning, grabbed my attention there for a second, where this is a point I think worth sort of talking about. You were saying, these new capabilities of ABCI++ and the new capabilities in Common BFT is what enables you to build powerful and protocol applications. So your pitch to the sovereign chains is now, instead of partnering and leaking value to another protocol that has to interact with you to accomplish a certain job, why don't you build this into your own protocol and raise your own value in the process? Is that how you guys think about this? And is that how you pitch it to protocols? Like make your own protocol more powerful and valuable?
Yeah, I mean, I strongly believe this should be the case. Like, it's not just because you should not leak value out. That's forgivable. It's because these applications perform like literally 10x better when you build them into your own chain. Like in the Oracle that we've built in Slinky and that we can like deploy into chains natively operates way like on performance margins that no other Oracle can come close to. Right, you have millisecond fresh price updates. Like when we told that to DYDX, and like once they understood sort of the implications of that, and to other perpetuals protocols as well, like that just sounds more exciting than importing prices from Chainlink or Pyth, where you have to wait for those prices to finalize on their chain, and then they have to be relayed over, right? And that relaying process usually takes 1 or 2 blocks, and so now your prices are at a minimum like 5 to 10 seconds delayed, right? So it makes a lot more sense from that perspective. And then also from a cost perspective, right? Because if you're building Slinky into consensus, you're not even and you're directing the prices directly into your state engine, you're not paying for gas. So you can have an unlimited number of currency pairs and you're not paying the additional gas cost that it would require to like load that state in from Pyth via a transaction. So in terms of price scaling too for the protocols, it makes a lot more sense. It's essentially flat.
In some sense, it places slightly more load on the operators, but I'm guessing a price oracle isn't really CPU or network heavy. So it's likely negligible. So yeah, I buy that. So it's sort of expansion and growth potential, essentially at negligible marginal cost. Inside.
It's just like native applications, and there's other native applications we're thinking about that are also very exciting, which might be a different podcast. But native applications, if built correctly, and are built into the consensus rules, are generally way more powerful than third-party applications, which makes sense. Like they're tailored to your blockchain, right? They're responsive to your needs. They're controlled by your own governance set, right? Now governance can say, hey, we want a new feed, and it's instantly added to the chain versus like going to Chainlink saying, hey guys, like what's your timing on adding this new feed? And they come back, 2 months later and they say, hey, we're looking into it. We're trying to get through compliance. Like, we're thinking about it. Don't worry. Like we've understood your requests, and then you have to there's none of that. Your governance says what they want, and you get it immediately because it's on your validators, right?
Yeah. So give me some of these examples. Like this sounds. It may be a different podcast. I agree, but let's hear some ideas.
All right, I can share one. So bridging, right? Normally, the way that Cosmos chains or applications connect to other ecosystems is through some kind of bridge, right? Hyperlane or Wormhole or Axelar or something like that. Especially so in the situation where you want to bridge tokens in from Ethereum, let's say you're a Cosmos chain, you can do that natively. And so what does that look like? That essentially means all you need to do is you need to load in Ethereum state. Like you just need to essentially publish the block header, and you can use that to construct a Merkle proof to prove that assets were locked up on a smart contract on Ethereum. And then you can just natively issue the asset to an associated account on the Cosmos blockchain, and vice versa. You can lock up your state, or you can post your state to Ethereum from Cosmos, and that will allow you to like natively unlock something on the Ethereum side. And so it's a two-way, very simple bridge that's run by your validators. There are some concerns with it. So you still get this sort of concept of like non-fungible native tokens. So if everybody has their own native ETH bridge, then the version of Ethereum that they have on each chain will be different, right? And so you have to figure out that. It's very similar to the IBC pathing story. But in terms of just like easy ways to like get assets over from Ethereum, this makes a ton of sense. And it's already something that's kind of being done by Injective and DYDX, right? So DYDX mandates that their validators run Ethereum nodes. Injective mandates that validators run Pego, which is, a bridge essentially. And so they have their own native bridges that allow for this. And so you can build this in a much better way if you sort of integrate it into Slinky and you use vote extensions. It's much more secure as well. And you can have like essentially an instant finality. I mean, if you're willing to take the risk and have like a market maker system, but an instant finality bridge, right? So you can just easily transfer tokens over and back.
A bridge that you control and you run. In my mind, bridges are always just like third party. So this is that's definitely a very interesting application of this. I see it as an application, or these potential is provided by this insane modularity on both like Cosmos SDK and Comet BFT side, right? It feels like you guys are plugging into that very effectively.
Well, it's like, I think one of the realizations is like, so if you have, let's say you have $10 million of economic security on your chain, right? So that's the amount of money you have staked. You can't ever do any better than that. Like, there's no third party that can give you more security unless you're doing something like Eigenlayer or Babylon or something like that. But in terms of like a bridge or an Oracle, you're not getting more security. Because at the end of the day, if 2/3 of your validators mess up or become malicious, then all of those integrations don't matter anymore, right? Like your prices will be modified, your bridge transactions will be modified. Like there's nothing protecting you. And so
if you're the weakest link in the chain, then the other ones don't matter. I guess that's
right. If your chain only has a certain amount of native security, then it doesn't matter like how secure your partners are, right? And so the idea of like native applications, right, or this idea of native restaked applications is like, okay, let's build then using your existing security something that has the exact same security properties up to 2/3. And secure that and use that to secure like, your bridge, your native bridge and your native Oracle and things like that. So that's how these things would work, right? So the bridge would be secured by, it would go through vote extensions. It would be integrated in consensus and it would be secured by your native stake. And so you can essentially just constantly rehypothecate your own stake to have these additional applications. And there's no way to do better, even if you're using a third party. So I think that's like the crucial click for us.
Vote extensions, I believe, is that V038 of Comet BFT. So yes, you support anybody, and that's pretty new. I don't think too many chains run that. Is that right? So you guys are still at the beginning of the integration potential here.
Yeah, exactly. So DYDX was upgraded. Who else is on it? Neutron's upgrading right now. Barachain was on it for their testnet. Injective, I think, will be upgrading to it. So the surface area is increasing. Also, it's like there are real applications for vote extensions. Like, previously different versions of the Cosmos SDK, it was sometimes hard to see the value for chains. With vote extensions, it's very clear what the value is because it unlocks all these different kinds of things.
I mean, this idea of sort of increasing the value of the protocol by aggregating these additional apps in the protocol code sounds really exciting. What I'm also, if there was a real sort of reward or incentive scheme around this, for the stakers, like that might make it the chain more attractive, right? Look, the validator nodes are doing more services for the protocol, and we're going to distribute some of the value back to the stakers via rewards. Then you could start also sort of competing on these, like how much work are my tokens doing in some sense, right? How can I use my tokens most effectively?
Yeah, like if you look at a foundation, right, like a chain foundation, like what does it spend money on, right? Oftentimes it will have some kind of like foundation delegation program. So we'll seed really good validators in the beginning to sort of like, get started. They'll also allocate money for spending, on an Oracle. They'll usually allocate money for spending on relaying. and they'll allocate money for definitely like some kind of bridge integration or like incentives there. And so all of that money could be poured into the same set of validators and just have those different processes be built as a sidecar on top of Slinky, right? And you could, make validators a lot more rich, and in the process also just have them essentially run very easy Dockerized versions of these different software. So yeah, that's like one vision of how you could make an app chain more powerful. That said, I do think bridges are valuable. Like, you don't want to do all the work that a bridge does sometimes. Like, for example, Axelar does a tremendous amount to figure out how to get the different states from all the different chains. And so I think like to start, like all you'd want to do is maybe have like, if you really need like a native bridge, or you really have one route that you care about, maybe you build something for that, but then you use a bridge for the rest of it.
So this is really interesting. What else are you guys focusing? If we now take a step back and look back into this 10,000 foot view, we got in pretty deep into this one. It's a super interesting convo. So, and I'm wondering if there's other stuff you guys are focusing or envisioning focusing on in the future. Are you what would be the other areas that are of immediate interest and of sort of full-on interest?
Yeah, I mean, so the other product that we focus on is the Skip API. So folks might have used this through IBC Fun, which is a front end that's built on top of the Skip API. Skip API is a multi-chain, essentially like a transfer and swap service. So it allows you to go from any token on any chain to any other token on any other chain in one transaction. And we really mean it when we say any chain, right? Like, now we integrate with Solana. So you can go, from Osmo, right, on Osmosis to USDC on Solana easily in one transaction. And then similarly for all the EVMs, we integrate over a ton of different bridges: Hyperlane, CCTP, Axelar. We're doing Wormhole next. And that just gives us the ability to blend the IBC experience with all the other experiences into a single transaction. There's a variety of technologies that are used behind the scenes to do this, like PFM and IBC hooks and things like that. But essentially, this is the service now that powers a meaningful amount of IBC volume. So for example, if you've ever used the Kepler swap feature, that is powered by the Skip API. We return those routes and we do their aggregation for them. If you ever bought a Bad Kids with anything other than stars, it used the Skip API to find out what your balances were and instantly swap those into stars so that you could buy your NFT. Trust Wallet will have the Skip API natively integrated very soon, which is the native, wallet for Binance. And so it's used as a way to traverse inside of IBC ecosystem more easily, but now increasingly a way for outside folks who want exposure to IBC. So, the Binances and Ethereums of the world to natively integrate their ecosystems into Cosmos.
I'm wondering, do you guys handle any compliance on top of this, like for somebody like Binance, or do they have to do all of this on their end and sort of like just you guys just solve for the routes?
Yeah, so we don't actually sign transactions, right? So all we do is we pre-form transactions that would get the user from wherever they want to go to wherever they want to go. And because we don't sign the transactions ourselves, that's like the job of the wallet. We don't put ourselves in the legal pathway of essentially being, a money transmitter or anything like that.
Makes sense. And what's the commercial model around this? Do you guys add some sort of tiny spread to each transaction? Is it a transaction-based model or some sort of volume-based model? What form do the partnerships take?
We never add any spread. So we never, like fake a metric or say like, oh, this is the swap rate, and in reality it's not. What we do is sometimes we charge an additional amount or we charge a small fee for relaying. So we natively have our own relayers integrated into the Skip API. Right now, it's not for IBC. So IBC relaying is completely free, but it is for CCTP relaying and cross-ecosystem relaying. So if you're going from Cosmos to Ethereum or Cosmos to Solana, there's like we use our bridges for that, which is a lot of additional infrastructure. And so we charge a small premium on the gas cost to do that bridging.
Makes sense. I mean, relaying is relaying is a tough business forever. Ever since I've never heard anybody say it's easy to operate a relayer, or it's always it's very expensive to operate a relayer, and you need to keep up balances, right? So have you guys somehow, do you run stock relayers, or have you built your own relayers? If you're talking about relaying to other ecosystems, what does that look like?
Yeah, we build fully custom, very complicated relayers that essentially have the ability to like first relay on IBC side and then like transform into a CCTP relayer so that they can do a seamless transaction across both. In addition, we're building in a lot of our own custom tooling into those relayers. So for example, we're adding the ability to not just send your tokens into the asset that you want, but also save a little bit extra for gas, so that you end up on that token, on that chain with the token you want, plus some of the native gas token.
Some native gas, right.
Yeah, so we're building that into the relayer as like a service. And so, yeah, these things look very custom on our side, and they're very, natively integrated into the API. And so they use a lot of our own indexing services and things like that to actually make it really fast.
How many people on the Skip team to build all of this stuff out?
We have 16 people. We have 6 of us on the Oracle team or the Slinky team. And then we have the remainder on the API team and the IBC Fund team.
So that sort of answers what the company focuses on. It's these two things. So building out the in-protocol, beefing up the in-protocol code to focus on the protocols, and then connecting them together. Is there anything left that you guys are not doing? UIs maybe?
I mean, IBC Fund is a UI.
Okay, yeah, so that's true.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we're not doing. Well, one thing we're not doing is MEV, right? Obviously. We're not building a protocol right now, right? We don't have a token. And so that sort of is aggravating to some folks. But, I think it's for us, it makes a lot of sense. Like we're truly building cross-chain tooling and we want to be neutral. And we don't want folks to believe that we have an additional incentive to pump something else besides just making their token more valuable.
That makes total sense.
And yeah.
Okay, so what about the future part? So these are both ambitious projects, and I think there's a lot of potential in there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's more stuff needed, but I'm curious if you look forward, if you feel there are more pieces of the puzzles that you guys want to focus on in the future.
There are. There's sort of a bigger vision that we have at Skip, which is sort of like the basic the basic way to interpret it is like Cosmos was very much right about how blockchains will be built in the future. And our bet is that we can make that reality like a lot more clear to everyone in crypto. And the way that we do that is we start to make like this idea of the internet of blockchains a lot more realistic. And so when we say internet of blockchains, what we didn't mean, but what has happened is a bunch of completely independent small L1s that are essentially not interoperable in a meaningful way and have a lot of like replicated and wasteful infrastructure and economic security, right? And so I think what we believe at Skip is that there's a combination, or there's a set of tooling and a set of new primitives to be built on Cosmos that connect blockchains much more seamlessly, or connect different L1s much more seamlessly, that'll enable them to do extremely powerful new things together, and also give it some kind of like economy of scale, where the nth chain joining is better off joining this web of blockchains than the n-1st chain, right? The chain before it.
Right. Pick up some network effects.
Exactly. And there aren't really any network effects in Cosmos or among L1s today, but there are ways that we can start to institute them. And so the Skip API and the Oracle are built by us for a reason. Right? They're not independent projects that just go after different sides of the market. That's not the purpose that we built them for. The purpose is because they actually are designed to work together in a very meaningful way. And that's stuff that we haven't released yet and is still very much so in like the initial prototype phase. But I think what that will herald, at least what we believe it will herald, is some of this network effect property of different L1s interconnected to be like an extremely powerful web, much stronger than any individual L1, in a way that unifies the user experience and unifies the security of all these different smaller chains into something much more powerful. And that's really what our mission is.
So that's a super interesting statement on the, Cosmos got it right. Appchains are the way forward. Building sort of independent block space is the path to the future. How are you squared with the current trends around, everybody building L2s, and the eigenlayer, having a huge valuation and tons of protocols want to hop onto eigenlayer, become an actively validated service? So in my mind, I'm thinking, how are these protocols going to get all the rewards that are needed to give meaningful APR to all those billions of dollars worth of ETH that's waiting to be restaked, right? Everybody wants economic ETH security, but how are you going to pay for that would be my question. So leaving that aside as a sort of, let's see what the economy comes out to. My question to you would be, do you feel that building a protocol that is related to or relying on a smart contract on a bigger protocol is somehow inherently, do you feel like that's somehow inherently an inferior way to build new projects versus doing it the Cosmos way, like just getting your own stack and getting your own validator set? Can you go into this part without worrying about the money for now?
Sure. Yeah. I don't really think about the money that much. So I think all of these are kind of just like asking the wrong question, right? So rollups are a way of essentially separating out your execution from your economic security, right? You have your economic security chain at the top, right, which essentially has some valuable asset. And then you separate out your execution into a different layer, right? And you have your own dedicated infrastructure for that. That's great. Like, I love rollups. I think they're sick. And that's why we're integrating Slinky into rollups. I think fundamentally, and then, Cosmos is a little bit more combined, right? It's, you sort of have your consensus and your economic security combined with your infrastructure. And so both of them offer different trade-offs, right? I think ultimately, though, they're both like asking the wrong question. And they're not understanding like the fundamental difference, or the fundamental difference between two very separate things, which is there's assets and there's execution, right? Like there's security, and then there's the way that your code actually gets architected and the infrastructure that runs it, right? The reality is the security element, the assets, so ETH, Bitcoin, Atom, Osmo, all these different assets, like those things should be fungible, or not fungible, but they should be able to be aggregated across for any ecosystem, right? You should be able to easily use all of them at the same time in one giant pool, right? And you should be able to enmesh yourself with the different communities that you want to be part of and use security and encourage token holders to use your protocol from, right? So if you want ETH and Osmo, sure. If you want Atom and Bitcoin, sure. Doesn't really matter, right? It should just be one bucket of assets. In terms of the execution, there are many different ideas for how to do it. I think L2s are a great way. But I think at the end of the day, most folks, I think, will find that if they are successful, they will want to reap the benefits of having their own native security, which means launching their own token. And to make that story make sense, you will need to tie the execution to your native token in a way that only Appchains can.
Right, so the example of this would be DYDX, which has gained product market fit and traction on Ethereum, and then they decided, okay, we need to have more control of our stack, we want different properties, and now we're big enough that we want our own. Is that sort of how you're thinking about this?
Yes, very much so. And it's not a question of like we're selfish and we want more rewards or anything like that. It's more so like, wait, when we tie our own native, when we have control over our own native security and we tie our own application into that, we actually unlock a better product, period. It just functions better, right? And you can have now things like Slinky, which is an oracle that's 10 to 100x faster than any existing oracle in the market, right? You can have things like native bridges, right? You can have a lot of things that make your product better that you wouldn't be able to do if they were still on an L2. And that's not to say like L2s won't have like a story, like they absolutely will have a story. And there's huge applications that will be built on top of them. But I think they're a generalization of this bigger thing, which is there's all these assets, they all provide security. They should be able to be essentially like enmeshed in a web and play off each other. And then there's execution engines below that that can either plug into them very deeply in the way that an app chain does, plug into the asset layer very deeply, or they can be fully separate, or they can use a restaked version from that asset layer. Like those should all be options, right? And there's no judgment that I have on like what's better than another. Like rollups make sense for certain use cases, especially in cases where you want like a single centralized sequencer, which actually makes a ton of sense for like really fast applications or gaming applications. You know, if you want something though that's a lot more, that requires like a distributed validator set or distributed operator set, that like, for example, something that uses something like Slinky, right, which has, you know, a ton of different validators participate in the finalization of a price, then it makes sense to build as an app chain. But I think right now, the way that app chains are structured, they're fully separate from everything else. Like you have your own little ecosystem that's just like its own island. And like, that's not really how it should be. Like in reality, they should be sort of in a similar, they should have an interop level that's similar to like a rollup or something that's like, you know, integrated natively into this overall web of things.
My takeaway is Skip wants to end tribalism in crypto through superior infra.
I like tribalism actually, which is interesting. I think people should be able to choose their own tribes, but there's not an alternative right now is the thing. There's not an alternative to tribalism.
That sounds like a great mission to have. Well, thanks very much for coming on today. Mag, this was a super interesting discussion. Always happy to chat. And good luck, guys. You're doing great stuff.
Thanks. Appreciate it.